Okay, good. So welcome everyone to another episode of the KQL Cafe 2023. As always, your hosts, Johnny and myself. And yeah, before we dive into the topics, we quickly want to recap with you after doing this for nearly a year. So Johnny and I got in touch in October 21, and we thought it's a good idea to continue to evangelize KQL as a language. And as our mission statement is, make the world a better place with KQL. So we had 10 shows, 9 guests in total. Quite some people who follow us through Meetup, also in the LinkedIn group. We originally also had a Discord group, but nothing moved there, so we're probably going to abandon that one. We have quite some subscribers in YouTube, and we're pleased to see that also the watch time is good enough, so still worth doing this. And total of 2,500 views in YouTube. So I believe we're doing the right thing. Next, we also want to give a little shout out to those who joined us last week. In the show notes, I will add all the Twitter handles and the various blog posts or Medium blog posts or GitHub repositories that they share. And I strongly recommend, now and then, to visit their content. There's always a lot to learn or to take away from there. I usually, when I have nothing to do, I just, go to github.com and search for anything like KQL, as I did recently. And I find a ton of cool things. Sometimes, some people you never heard of them that really create awesome content, which hopefully will soon also be searchable in the KQL search, which I want to show you in a few minutes. So yeah, as Johnny mentioned, our guest had a last-minute disappearance or cancellation, but we have someone else for you. So and we'll introduce him later, and actually, a very cool topic to discuss. So what's new? There's not really something new in terms of new functions, etc. But something that inspired me, first of all, was this blog post from the Microsoft Dart team. So the people that do the incident response. And sometimes, as I like to say, the beauty is in the simplicity. So there are quite a couple of cool KQL functions in here, and I talk about them, one of them later throughout the show. But if you haven't looked at those, take a look, and if you find the examples not good enough in Microsoft Docs, just search for them. Now and then you find some good examples, as Johnny did recently with the base 6040 coding, etc.
And I think for maybe the next show or the show after one, the parse user agent is also a really interesting one, because you can map user agents to users, because it might be strange if a user goes for a lesser version of a browser, for instance. And you can do really cool things with the parse user agent, but I'll prepare something for the next show for that one.
Yeah. And today I'll just do the basics on the parse user agent, so you have a little
cool.
teaser on that. Yeah. Good. Another thing that came to my mind, and yes, I prepared those slides before our guest had to cancel. So this is the work from Rogier, who is actually on the show, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, so I'm not going to lose too much words on this one. And then KQL Search, also a very cool project. As you can see, you can search here for, let's say device, and you find all the KQL queries, that do something with device. And yeah, this was developed by, don't want to pronounce his name incorrectly.
Rogier.
So yeah, he will also be on our show. Actually, I believe next month, right?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, and yeah, what
because he had
basically
two great projects. This one and also the 50 or 100 days of Intune.
Yeah,
where he did
exactly.
KQL with Intune. So that's also really cool.
Yeah. So what's behind KQL search is basically, he's basically searching, providing an interface, so you don't have to travel to all those repositories individually, but basically, you can go to KQL search and you find all the awesomeness that these guys here have created. So yeah, a little bit of motivation, Johnny, for us to get us listed here as well. Good. Next, what do we have next? Yeah, another thing I wanted to show you, because recently I learned that a colleague of mine wasn't aware of this. So let me quickly show you what this is. This is quite useful if you use, of course, for those that have Microsoft 365 Defender in use. So let me go there. We talked about performance earlier. Now, if you are in the Microsoft portal, you can go here, first of all, to the, no, that's not the one. Where is it? Here, reports. Yeah. Okay, good. And here you have query sources. Now, in my little world, I have nothing that is excessive, but if you would have queries running either, and that's the interesting part, you can do quite some filtering on this. So you might have custom indicators that are not, that are maybe using a lot of resources. You might just have your colleague at the next desk using a lot of resources, but also anything that comes through API calls. So if you have some automation in use, that queries the Microsoft 365 Defender API, you would see that here, right? You will also see whether you have timeouts. And actually, when we prepared yesterday, I think the usage, you see low, medium, high, and you would also find those that have been throttled. So if you wonder why maybe something is running slower or taking longer, this is where you can find out. You will see the queries being executed. For example, here we have a custom indicator rule. So you see the beginnings of the queries and who executed it, etc. So just in case you didn't know, I find this quite useful. And speaking about APIs, maybe it's another thing a little bit related that might be interesting to know. If you wonder who is still, leveraging the API, maybe to do advanced hunting, you can actually click here on connected applications. And there you would actually see, what applications are connecting through your Defender portal. Yeah. Good. So that was a little one, just in case. Yeah, parse user agent. So let me bring that one up quickly in my. Here we go. These are the user agents scripts. Yeah. Okay. Good. So what I did here to illustrate that a little bit, I have to take everything. Yeah, as Johnny mentioned, we can get quite some interesting information out of the system when we know the user agent now usually gets a very long string. So come on. Usually gets a very long string. So if we want to normalize that a little bit, we can do this. What I did here, basically, let's do that step by step. So first of all, of course, I want to know, the user agent. If I just did this one, user activity. Let me see if I get any results here in my demo environment. Yeah, and you will see this is the user agent. So, lots of information there, whether it's Windows NT, mobile phone, I see the browser version, etc. And normally in a corporate environment, if you have standardized on your browser, you will probably have the same user agent most of the time. Now, of course, if you're also allowing your users to work from home, from their personal devices, you might have a larger variation of those. But yeah, this is, the user agent. Now, with the parse user agent, we can actually, first of all, I want to parse that. So the result is the following. And what I can extract from the user agent is basically the browser, the OS, and the device. That is what I can do. So already, you see the information is already a little bit more normalized. So, and now I basically extract all those things. And yeah, if I do that like this. I basically have a nice overview of the operating systems, the browsers being used, etc. Now there are thousands of user agents. I even found someone or a company who is vending, who's selling user agent lists like track intelligence information. That does a mapping, etc. But yeah. Definitely interesting if you're doing track hunting. There are also some user agents sometimes known. If you read the track intelligence reports, of the investigators, so in case you have a very specific user agent you want to look for. So here, as an example, I just joined Office activity and the sign-in logs and AAD non-interactive sign-in logs. Since I'm using Microsoft Sentinel and the appropriate data connectors, I then normalize that a little bit. And yeah, this is the result where I get, for example, an overview of all the browser families that I have. Like, okay, here I have some Python requests. I could do the same, like distinct by OS family. And let's see what happens in my little lab. Okay, I have iOS, other Windows, etc. So that is a very simple application of the parse user agent function. What did I do here? These are separate ones. Yeah, and then of course, if you do in track hunting, what you can do is the following. Once you create your baseline, for example, you would do probably something like this for your environment where, let me quickly exclude that one. So after a little bit of, so you know what type of agents are maybe common in your environment, and then, you would probably find out those, that aren't common in your environment, or the opposite, where is in. So if I now say distinct, what did I do here? Where browser family? And now I see, okay, Python requests, it was not something that I had excluded here. So that's how they come, on top of my mind. Yeah. Good. That's my contribution to the topic of user agents. And then another find I made, and it always happens when I'm actually doing something else, I came across, again, this is for those that use Microsoft 365 Defender for Endpoint, and there, since a while, we do have a table that is called device info gathering. Now, since I'm forwarding all my logs into Sentinel, I can run that script here as well, if I am not mistaken. Yeah, of course, I have to quickly adjust it one, and maybe not. Okay, that table is not yet sent. Is that possible? Yeah, okay. Never mind. I just skip over to here. I'm going to open advanced counting in Microsoft 365 Defender. Go to advanced counting. Create a new query. Then, of course, copy this one. And make that a little bit larger. So before we dive into the query, let's quickly first look into device TVM info gathering table. What we get here is, interesting information. The interesting part is actually, in here. So there were other methods in the past. For example, if you wanted to create an inventory of your, antivirus engine and pattern file states, you would do that by basically parsing the, engine executables and that sort of things. But now we actually have all that information in here, as you can see. Now this record doesn't hold a lot, so let me quickly go to another one. Yeah, so here you can see, I guess, quite a lot of interesting information in this table. So your AV mode, your AV engine version, signature version, platform version. So as an inspiration, and I'm actually working on that, if you, again, use the Microsoft 365 Defender interface, you might be or not be aware of the device health report when it loads. And the device health report is actually showing you, a nice summary of all your engine versions and, antivirus states, etc. So device health. And here you see Microsoft Defender virus health. So you see, whether you're compliant and if you have all the out of date, etc. And the underlying queries that you can build against those. For example, maybe if you use config manager, you would have created your collections. But now let's quickly forget about config manager and Intune and software hardware inventory. You can basically get all that information out of Defender by running those KQL queries. So you see, you have, of course, also other information in here. You see when the last scan was executed, the signature update time. So not just when it was released by Microsoft, but also when it actually was applied on your system. And then while I was actually looking into that, I found here these ASR configuration states. Yeah, and that took my interest. And you see, you have all those ASR rules, actually the states. So I thought, okay, let's do something with that. Maybe I should have done that 2 weeks ago when we had this little side effect of for those who had ASR enabled in block mode for the Win32 macro apps. Nevertheless, so I thought, okay, cool. So what I'm doing here, basically, I am going to look into device info. I'm only interested in onboarded devices. I'm only interested in the records where OS platform is there. Because I want to have that information side by side. And now I am actually going to do a join with device TVM gathering, and I extend the additional fields, and then I could do that in one, but sometimes for illustration, I like to do it in 2 steps so people can follow along. I'm then gonna parse the ASR configuration states. I'm going to remove the rubbish that I don't need. And then I use the evaluate back unpack, which basically will transform all those states, as you can see here. So now we have, instead of having them in an array in one field, they're now expounded as individual columns. And finally, I project away the device name again as I have them double. Great. So I thought that's cool. I mean, most people will recognize the meaning of these ASR rules. These are the names, and of course they sound familiar. But I thought, well, what if I wanted maybe in the future, create a report and have a little bit more, human reading in them. So I was looking a little bit further and found out that let me actually quickly remove this. Okay, I found out there is also not only a device TVM info. Here we go. TVM info gathering table, but also a KB. So let's look into that KB. What that has us to tell us. Like we have from the vulnerabilities, for those familiar with the matter. So there's also a KB table corresponding that basically holds, information that relates to the device info gathering. So looking in here, okay, what do we see? If we scroll down a little bit, here we see ASR, and not too much rocket science. We see a unique ID, and we see the field name, and we see the description. Okay, so I thought that description sounds a little bit, more human readable. Yeah, good. So there we go. I am first, I first just need a table because I'm only interested in this information. So to keep data volume low. Okay, there you go. So I have all my rule names and a nice description. Good. Then I repeat what I did before, basically. But then I found out that, as you can see here, in the new rules, it always had the prefix of ASR before it. Yeah, good. So removing that, doing here, and then I'm basically gonna join that, and in the very end, I'm gonna pivot that. And to be honest, when I spoke about this yesterday with Johnny, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm making a loop too much or not, but that's up to you to help me. But yeah, the result is now almost what I want. So now you see, meaningful descriptions of the ASR rules. Now I have the next challenge I'm still working on. As you can see, the values in here are now still in those brackets. So Yeah, probably have to do some more parsing or extracting here to basically get this nicely formatted. That's why, I mark this as still in progress. Yeah. But yeah, the goal of this whole thing is that we have a quick way to find out our attack service reduction rule configuration that is currently applied on a per device level. Because through reporting, we do have some possibilities. If you go to the attack service reduction rules report here, you will find, first of all, of course, the results. And you will find this one. But honestly, if you're like me, like usually having a couple of thousand devices in front of you, this is not really cool to look at. So you probably want to use an advanced hunting query, to get a quick overview of, what is actually deployed where and in which state is it deployed. Good. Again, I think we're going to inject our very special guest, Rogier. And for that, I quickly want to do a little introduction before I let him introduce himself, because, I often make that comparison with PowerShell, where I say, okay, in the early 2000s, PowerShell was really the thing, people should learn, and I was advocating at the time as well. And that's why with KQL, I have that little deja vu, now I'm doing by far less PowerShell in my daily job than KQL, because I always try to think of, can I do it with KQL first? So if you're a happy user with Microsoft Sentinel, you have Defender for Identity deployed. There are a couple of use cases where actually you don't need PowerShell anymore to retrieve Active Directory related information, because you can do it now with KQL as well. So nevertheless, back in the days, in PowerShell land, we had also discussions about these type of things, right? Like, okay, how should we code our PowerShell scripts? Do you use capital letters, little letters? All sort of those things. There are different styles, and there's people that have written whole books about that. How you should code and how not, and whether we should indent or not indent. We then also have script analyzer, in VS Code that helped us a little bit to meet certain standards that the community and the industry has set, and that's okay. But then I was really super amused. Then Rogier came up with this, and with that, I would actually like to hand over to Rogier. Have yourself introduced, and maybe talk a little bit how you actually came up with the idea of launching this KQL Coding Style guide.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. And that was actually a great introduction. You're really breaking my heart saying that you're using less PowerShell, more KQL, because you do the same. You've got an amazing module in PowerShell to run KQL queries, but that's something for another show. Yeah, thanks. And thanks for having me on the show. Rogier Dijkman, coming from the Netherlands, a fanatic marathon runner and a script kiddie. Been writing a lot of code in PowerShell, VB.NET, and various other languages. And also diving into the world of KQL, which should be the new PowerShell, according to some people that didn't show up tonight. Based on that background, I've worked on a lot of projects. We were using extensively PowerShell to create modules for Azure DevOps, and other kinds of solutions. And we always held ourselves to very strict coding standards. Well, why do we do that? Because we were working with quite large teams, which were globally distributed. I was located in Amsterdam with a group of 10 people, and we had some developers in India and in Poland. And just to make code more recognizable and easier to read, we decided to stay strictly to our coding standards, because it really makes the reviewing process a lot easier. And it makes it a lot easier to read the code and understand what's really happening. And it's like the same like every language. And if it's a programming language, a coding language, or a normal language, if we, as Western people, read a book, we are used to it at all. The lines start at the left-hand side and we read from left to right. So what if we're suddenly going to align everything to the right? Then it will get pretty messed up and people really don't understand what they're reading anymore. And I think it's quite the same with coding. So if you find out what a good standard is, that the community is willing to use, that would make our lives a lot easier. So the funny thing in this story is, if you look at the KQL query language, it's a language is quite often being used, and not only within log analytics or within Sentinel to write your passes and your analytic rules and that kind of stuff, but it's also being used in Azure Monitor, and it's also being used within Data Explorer and various other solutions. Funny enough, there's still no standard on how to write a code and how the code should look like, and to indent or to not to indent. Maybe a famous writer from the early 1800s would say. So yeah, that was for me a good starting point to write this page. When starting this, you always first need to look at some examples, and I like to look at the bad examples and then look at the good examples. So at least I know I'm adding a little bit of value, although it's not much according to Johnny. We have massive discussions about this. To indent or not to indent. So if you don't mind, I can share my screen and
Sure.
give you a couple of examples of how done. I've downscaled the resolution on my laptop, otherwise it's going to be really hard to read. Now it's only hard to read for me because it's really big letters. Where's my mouse? Here we go. Okay, so I also got the KQL Coding Standards published on my GitHub. The link will be shared in the show notes. If you have any comments or recommendations or anything you want to add, adjust, or discuss, just go to the GitHub page, change the code, open up a pull request, and I will look at it and probably like your comments and do something with it. I am using Azure Sentinel quite a lot, and at the current project that I'm working on, I'm writing a lot of passes, mainly networking passes. So I was looking at the GitHub of Microsoft and how they've written the code to get a good example. And I was looking through the code, and this is just one of the files that I've got there. And I thought, well, it looks pretty neat, pretty clean. What am I complaining about? It's all properly aligned. It's all easy to read. No problem here, right? So, but I thought, well, if it's nice in the GitHub repo, how nice is it in Sentinel? Well, so I went to Sentinel, I went to the functions and looked for the same function, the IM networking sessions, which is the same as this one. Here we go. Where is it? IM network sessions. So the beautiful aligned code within the Git repo ends up with this. And I thought, what the hell is going on here? Well, apparently somebody created the code somewhere in its VS Code instance and thought, well, it looked nice. This is properly usable for my pull request. But if you open it up in the portal, it's really hard to understand what's going on here. We do understand the first part. We are declaring some parameters and variables, but then we really have to dive deep into the code to see what Vim parsers, in this case, are actually being called with what parameters. And funny enough, even they make copy-paste errors, because there's a major error in the guard variable. And there's also an error somewhere in the, where is it again? In the vector. So I thought, okay, let's take this example and apply some coding standards to it, which we know from Python and which we know from PowerShell. Well, that ended up pretty nice, to be honest. So what I've did here is just using a bit of indentation, put some empty lines between it, and split up my arrays in multiple lines. So suddenly, the hard-to-read code that Microsoft produced, in this case, suddenly becomes clear and understandable, to my opinion at least. So now we do see that we are declaring a set of parameters, and what kind of parameters they are. Dynamics, integers, a string value, we've got a Boolean that's false in this case. And now it's actually split up into every FIM parser in a logical order, what parameters are being provided. So this got me thinking, and I thought, okay, if this works for me and I like this, I'll show it to some other people. Well, they liked it. Had some discussion with Johnny, as said before, but eventually he agreed to 90% of it. The last 10%, I'm still winning that fight, although he doesn't know yet, but we're getting there. So yeah, that was basically the story, how I started off with. So I went back, started my GitHub page, and thought, well, okay, we need a proper introduction. And what always worked for me is to have a good example and a bad example, because you can write coding standards and say, well, you need to declare it in this way, and this is how you align your equal signs, and this is where you put your commas. But it doesn't really make sense if it's just been written down. So I always like to put a code example, a real life example, and how you can adjust a new style to it. So one of the things that you see here is, well, we're declaring some stuff again, the same function, and we've got all the commas at the end of the line. The equal signs are attached to the Boolean in this case and to the string, which makes it harder to read. You know, it's the same with the normal Western language like English and Dutch. If we write a sentence and we don't put any spaces in between it, it's going to be a hard and difficult book to read. Probably will take ages. And that's what you want to prevent when reviewing code. You just want to look at the code, recognize the code, understand the code, scroll through it, understand what's happening, and do adjustments where needed. So a lot of things are debatable here. Either if you put a comma in front of the line or in the back of the line. If you put it in the back of the line and I would outcomment this line, that will generate an error because it's expecting an array. Whereas if you put a comma in front of the line and you outcomment it, the code will understand it and will just run through. So there are various examples being written down, and also an example how it should look like. Back to you, Alex.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I was quite happy to see this. I mean, to be honest, you know, I you know, in PowerShell, I like a lot of stuff, but I find myself not doing it. Yeah, there are things that I actually started to do, like, you know, declaring the variables and having the equal sign on the same level because it's, you know, more readable. You know, have I been very constant with, you know, I think it's called the SUS group thing, which was derived from C++, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm just telling bullshit here, but that's the thing I always saw, you know, my PowerShell script analyzer complaining like you're not meeting that standard. So I went back. But yeah, I believe especially when you're sharing code or when you're revisiting your own code after a while, it can be very helpful. I mean, you know, when you're in creative mode, I would say, you know, don't bother too much. But think about it, it's the same like defining your variables, right? I mean, when I'm in creative mode, I just do an X and an A and a B and a C, and then, you know, when I know I'm going to publish it, or in the past when I used to code things, you have to make it readable, right? I mean, there's nothing worse, and I see it all the time in enterprises where you have some semi-advanced, you know, copy-paste scripters that just, you know, copy-paste it all together, and you can exactly see by the variables, you know, how it came to the end of that script.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I'm super interested, of course, about the feedback. And maybe if someone from our audience would like to give a comment whether, you know, they like this or not, and I'm definitely interested, you know, whether we manage within the KQL community to kind of get to this coding standard. I mean, it's a little bit the same something that I've been observing, you know, people that share code. I mean, in the beginning, I was stealing the format from Microsoft when they started with their, you know, markup files. I then looked at those from Olaf, from Falcon Friday, that are a little bit more meaningful, also with more context, description, MITRE ATT&CK. I went that route. The other day I saw Bert Young Paul's template, which I also like, and it's all still markup, right? Then we have YAML options, okay, readable. We have ARM templates, not so readable. We have Bicep now. And I'm really scratching my head, like, wouldn't it be cool? I mean, in the very end, when you want to read stuff, as I mentioned in the introduction, I often go by GitHub and I just, search for anything that's KQL. And yeah, in terms of readability, yes, I like the markup files because, there's some context in it. And if I have to go through ARM templates, that's a little bit more, disturbing to concentrate if you're doing that for a couple of hours. So similar to, how should we store our KQL scripts? I very much welcome also that we start a discussion and hopefully also an adoption to some extent of how we could write beautiful code.
Yeah, and that was the whole purpose of the article, not to be the smart guy and say, well, this is how I think that you should write the code and I'm right. It's more to get the discussion going, that people at least start thinking about how they write the code. And there is a MVP, and he's called SQL Admin with a Beard, and he's doing a lot on SQL Server, but also writing a lot of scripts.
I know him. Yeah.
I think about 2 years ago, he gave a presentation that I attended about scripting in general. And one of the famous things that he said that stick to my head is, write your code like your follow-up guy is a psychomaniac that knows your home address. So make sure your code is good and understandable. Otherwise, your follow-up guy will know where you live and he will find you. So, always look back to your code like, okay, I'm proud of this. And of course, when you've written code, and still I have that I've seen my code of a year ago, and I think, what the hell was I thinking? Do it in this way. It could be a lot more nicer and cleaner. But, at the point in time, just make sure that you understand the code and that you write it in a way that somebody else also probably understands it.
Have you thought of creating a VS Code extension for it that will tap you on your fingers? Like,
yeah, that's one of the things that crossed my mind. On the one side, create a linting solution for VS Code, where it would just advise you on how to write your KQL. And the other thing that I'm still thinking of is to create something like a GitHub action or something for Azure DevOps, that when you open up a pull request with your code, that will automatically align your code or give you comments back how you could improve your code.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Linting can be ignored if you put it in an extension or in a pull request. Then you're being forced to optimize it.
I think what would be a nice one to do is, because I think point number 5 in this list is the one that Rogier and I discussed the most. Because point 5 is, yes, a bit down. So over here you have the parse KV part, and then you have the width, and then Rogier splitted the pair delimiter and the KV delimiter. And in my mind, those are parameters for the width. So I would put them in one line. That's something we agreed to disagree. But I was wondering what the rest of the gang thinks of it. Is it something you would do like this, or would you say I put it all in one line?
If you're too shy to comment live, feel free to drop a note in the chat, like thumbs up, thumbs down, or
try.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, if you say that I'm right, doing it in multiple lines, you'll get free stickers.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So, perfect, because I have big issues with my headphones, so I'm not sure whether you can hear me or my daughter, maybe both. I find it to be a very good idea and approach, and this would need to be incorporated by Microsoft first, and then by all the solution providers, or by the community. So very cool approach. Really kudos to you, Rogier, to start with that, and that's really great. So maybe this can be added to some or also provided to the community by Rod Trent in his KQL sessions as well. I walked through your guidance, and I found it to be it's heavy load. Like, okay, so now I need to have maybe could be summarized at some point. I don't know, but for me, it's learning by doing, obviously, and I really need to get rid of my bad habits when it comes to KQL coding. But I found it to be a very, very good initiative from you guys. That you start with that, but it's heavy stuff in the beginning, so you see, okay, I need to think of this and that and whatever, but yeah, kudos, really, thumbs up.
Well, good feedback, thank you very much. And it's actually a very good idea to create some kind of a summary where we just use a short wrap up of all the coding standards that we applied. And I did try to do something like that at the end of the code, where I grabbed an example of Microsoft of various bits and pieces from this parser from Microsoft, and showed how I'm aligning the code, and with a little explanation with it. But what I can do is create a couple of examples from code that's already available in production within Sentinel, for example, add the coding standards to it, and give a summary why it's being done in this way within different scenarios. So yeah, we'll definitely pick it up.
And I think in the end, there's not a right or wrong. But like they explained in the beginning, it's if your peers can understand what you're doing without having to decipher anything, that makes it easier. And it makes it also better to understand, because sometimes you have a detection, and for newer people, it's hard to understand what the query is doing. And if they also have to mix and match where the parameters and where the variables are, then it only makes it harder. So to make it for everyone easier, a standard it's nice to have.
Yeah, and it is a guideline.
I was wondering whether Microsoft could add some of this functionality in their format query button they have in Log Analytics. I don't know if it's possible.
Just for the other audience, so let me show you what Christoph means. That's the following. When you are in when I change my resolution, it's for this show, it's very hard. Okay, so imagine you have something like this, right? All indented. And you can right click here. You have the same, by the way, in Microsoft 365 Defender. You can click on Format Document. And then at least it will do some, some beautifying. But that's really all.
Yeah, and one of the main things that it does is putting a comma, a space behind a comma, and I think a space behind the equal sign. Mm-hmm. When I wrote the article, I also posted it to Twitter, which was picked up by somebody from Inside who's working a lot with Microsoft, and tagged Rod Trent in it, and Rod Trent picked it up and would bring it back to the team. So Microsoft is already looking at the document and see what it can do with it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, then we have, the SQL as per Rogier, and then in a couple of years there KQL as per chaotic.
Definitely. So the thing that I'm discussing most with Johnny is aligning the equal sign, and I think Alex remembers that from the PowerShell time. Yeah. Where and I don't know how many PowerShell developers are in the audience, or former PowerShell developers, But if you create a object in PowerShell and you say align code, all the equal signs are automatically being aligned to each other.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just write it beneath each other, not an object, it won't do that. So I just took that approach, like, okay, I want to see this as an object. I want to align it like PowerShell would align this code. But that's the biggest discussion that I'm having with my good old friend on my right-hand side called Johnny.
Yeah. No, but it definitely makes sense. I know what you mean. For the rest of the audience, again, let's make a little excursion into PowerShell then. So that's a while ago, and you were referring to those type of things, right? Where you
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I really, believe, it's more readable. But as you can see here, there's also a discussion where, well, this security should be here, right? And those sort of things. And that's where I haven't been that consistent, or just took the arrogance to create my version of how I like it.
Yeah, it's the same discussion with putting backticks in front of your parameters in PowerShell.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But that is one of the discussion. And then again, it's all about readability. So if you find it readable without aligning the equal signs, that's all fine with me. At least if there is some standard, and it's good that we have this discussion, because at least we are thinking about it and talking about some kind of a standard that we can apply and expand within the KQL community.
Yeah. No, I think we should definitely do maybe a little poll. As I showed in the beginning, we have quite some people. Some active, some not, but in the LinkedIn, in the Twitter followers, and let's see, what we get back there. And definitely worth the effort here. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Good. So let's continue. What do we have? We have Johnny. Johnny is going to talk us also an interesting topic, something when he told me last night, I thought, okay, that's a cool thing, because that's definitely something everyone has come across. And the challenge with KQL sometimes is that you really you have a lot of data, you get a lot of rows back, and it's the same like when you're doing join operators. You might think the data is correct, but at times I find myself also like, no, the data isn't correct. There is still some rows somewhere, because maybe something just fell off the table. So give it away, Johnny, and tell us about the multiple not statements.
Cool. So there are some options, and what I'll do is I came across this working on some queries, some detections. So what I was doing in this case, I was working on Palo Alto Networks data, and I wanted to exclude some of the filters. So first I looked at the data, and I saw, hey, I have these records. And what I want to do was I want to see, in this case, the threads. And there are in total 413,000 records. And I was thinking, okay, so for the thread log, I wanted to have to exclude from the results the URLs, the file, and the wildfire logs. And then I was looking at it, and it says, hey, you have 3 million records. So when I was doing this, I thought, well, I have 400,000 and I have 3 million, so something was wrong. So I was looking at the order of the filtering. So I was thinking, hey, maybe you can do it differently. So I, instead of just doing the OR statement, I did a not in combination with the filters, and then that worked. And also on the other side, you can do all AND statements, and then you'll get the same results, but in a second. But the thing is, you have to think of how you construct your queries, because for now it's working on these two results, but at the first one it failed because it probably gets all the records multiple times. So it gets all the records where it's not URL, and it gets all the records where it's not file, and then it gets all the records where it's not wildfire. So it's a good thing to do this. And also I worked at one of my customers, and what we noticed was the same behavior where you used several columns. So in this example, I only worked with the device event class IDs. But in my other example, I'll show a bit more on how you can do this if you have multiple columns. So for instance, this is the aka.ms log analytics one. So it's the open source play all you want workspace. You go to, I'll put it in the show notes, but aka.ms and then LA for log analytics and then demo. And then you get in this environment where you have all these results. And
I just wanted to add, I always give Johnny a hard time, when on Monday evening he shows me his work that is proprietary, and I always say, hey, Johnny, very cool, but can you make it an example everybody can follow? So
True.
Thank you for that, Johnny, for doing that.
Had to send the little one downstairs. So what we do is, if you go to the performance login and you check at, in this case, object names, we have for the performance login, you have disks, processor, process, you have all these records. But what if we don't want to see the logical disk one? And then we can exclude it, and then it's all fine. You have 4 million and a bit over here. Yeah. And then you have a bit less for, we can do it like this. So the logical disk is about almost 60K. So the next example is if we exclude some of the others. You have the network adapter, and you have this, and as we saw in the earlier example, you don't want to do an OR with the negates, because then it's not always working right. So we do the same over here, and then we have 3.8 million, which is the expected results. So let's do something, and here's the other example. So there's matches. So the next thing what I wanted to show was, we have the object name column with logical disk, and we have the disk writes, for instance. So we have the object name and the counter name. So this is 112K and this is 57K. So what I wanted to do was to exclude where we have the logical disk and where we have where the logical disk has disk writes the counter name. We have this result, and you can also do it like this, where you have both in quotes. But the thing is, if you run it like this, it will show you with the exclusion of only the logical disk. And if you say, hey, I want to have both the logical disk and the counter name, you have to put it in brackets for it to properly work. Because if we do say, give me this without the negates, then you can see it's 7K. So if we then do get the total, so that's it should be around 4.1 million. And if we do it with this one, then we get the results. So if you want to have a double negate over multiple columns, then you have to do it like this way. So you do a not and then the and. So, and this equals because it's already negated over here. So that's what I've ran into this month and played with. So it's if you do an or statement or if you do an and statement with multiple columns, use the brackets to make it a set, and then it works.
So is there a difference in performance on both query methods?
Between it I think it depends. Let me check. So this one works, and we do the query details. Let's just show all records. Then it has to work a bit. So over here, this is 2.3 seconds. And if we do the same with this one.
Already telling you you're using a lot of resources.
It's what 0.1 second.
Okay, yeah.
So it's not that much, but in this environment, I only have, let's see, make it count. I don't have that much of records, but if you have a live environment where you have millions, 150 million, 160 million of records in a day, then it can make a difference. It's always good to test things out, not only to see for your performance, but also to know how operators are working. I think if you put the reference back also to PowerShell, you can also achieve in PowerShell things in multiple ways. You can have run jobs, asynchronous, you can do things as jobs. And sometimes you choose for one option and sometimes for the other. Same with array and hash tables. If you have a lot, you prefer hash tables maybe. And if you have just 10 records, then maybe an array. And the same goes with the KQL. If you have, you can play around with it to see what's happening.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely worth to give that a try, or maybe someone is now thinking, are my queries correct?
Yeah, it can happen, because sometimes also when you've created something a while ago and you thought, hey, let me do a join like this, and then all of a sudden after a year or a year and a half, you look at the query again and you're thinking, hey, why didn't I test this? Why didn't I see this? And then all of a sudden you revisit your own queries.
Yeah. I always get like this little moment where I take a deep breath when I look at someone's query and I see them doing a right outer or something like that. Then that always gets my attention. Like, okay, why are they doing it like that?
Yeah.
Which is good. I mean, there must be probably a reason, or maybe because they didn't follow the best practice of keeping the smaller table on the left and the larger one on the right, and that sort of things. Yeah.
Oh.
Cool. Yeah. Okie dokie. Then, yeah. What do we have more? Let me see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I am going to show something just out of my daily life. Yeah. Let's call it applying KQL day-to-day work. Because we might write queries just for the sake of queries, but I also want to inspire people that maybe don't think like I'm waking up in the morning just to write a query, but just, because they have to maintain or operate something, and how that skill, like with PowerShell, you have to do something and you can do it slowly, or you can do it fast with PowerShell, and KQL is a little bit the same. So here what we have Microsoft 365 Defender for Cloud App Security. What we can do here, basically, we can, as they call it, for those who don't know the product, I can say, I don't want my users to use those cloud applications. So typically, companies will block things like file transfer services, because they want their users to use OneDrive or Box, but not some obscure file transfer, portals where they have no control over where their documents are going. So in this very simple example, nothing against Yahoo, but it was just part of my demo. So let's suppose I want to block Yahoo. And again, this solution is not meant for blocking like, weapons and drugs website. Usually, cloud app security is really meant for blocking applications, as you can see them here, that are, falling into a certain category, like, webmail, social networks, hosting services, and whatever. So what happens when I actually, unsanction an app? I block it basically. If you use Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, the result is that over here in the indicators, it will basically create an entry. And because application can also have multiple URLs, it will do its job as good as it can. So that's why I have all those multiple Yahoo entries in here, right? Now, what happens when a user goes to Yahoo now? He will get in the Explorer a nice red warning message telling him, like, you cannot go there. And depending on your configuration, whether you will allow the user to bypass or not, but that will stop the user from going to Yahoo. Now, currently how the solution works, when you click on section here, it will make an entry here. And if I just click here on this one, you will see this is all grayed out, right? So I have no choice of, even preventing the generation of an alert. All I can do, I can say, well, let's keep this as an informational alert. Nevertheless, I had a customer who was telling me, well, the problem is all those alerts are still popping up, even though it's informational, they are popping up like here, right? Or first of all, of course, they're popping up in here. So when a user clicks on it, it will generate an informative alert with the title "Connection to a custom network indicator was established." And if I go in here, I will see that my demo user, he clicked on Yahoo, right? So that was not that one, but somewhere up here, there's the somewhere on here, that was another test I was making, but somewhere here we see that there was this Yahoo connection which was blocked. So now that incident ends up here. So if I go here to my incident, let me quickly. I can here see my entities. I see that okay, Yahoo was there. So yeah, and now I need to bring intelligence to Microsoft Sentinel to help me automate that thing. So what I did was the following. First of all, I created a playbook that will retrieve this list, this indicator list, this list here, endpoints, indicators, that will retrieve that list And too many windows open. Okay, so it will run on a periodic basis. It will get the indicators through the Defender API, and it will create a watch list for me. And the reason why I'm creating a watch list because I don't want to, for whatever reason, I decided that I'm not going to go to the API all the time whenever there's an alert, because I think that's unnecessary. It's good enough, because people are not unsanctioning applications throughout the whole day, like hundreds of changes. So I thought I'd create a watch list because I can use that watch list also for other ad hoc purposes. So the result is that I have a watch list. And if I now have in Sentinel here my watch list, which is called my MDE Indicators watch list. So I see, everything that I have in MDE as well. Now, when it comes to responding to the alert, I created an automation rule where I said, okay, if I have an alert that has a connection to a custom network indicator, then please take a look for me whether that is an indicator which maybe my security team has added because there's something fishy out there, or whether the indicator actually originated from Microsoft Defender for Cloud App Security. So, and how to find that one out, for that I created yet another playbook. So they run independently. I get an incident. I retrieve all the URLs from the incident. I go through the incident, through each URL. I will identify whether that URL is actually part of my unsanctioned URL list. I have to do some magic here. By the way, again, this is where extracting the top level domain from the URL. And then if that was a match, I append it. And if it was okay, I write a comment. So the result is basically the following, where I will say, okay, I checked this incident, I look at the entities, I executed this playbook, and I found out that those URLs are actually part of the unsanctioned application. Now, of course, this is too simple. I discussed this already with a colleague. Of course, before going into production, we have to add a little bit more intelligence to it because, you could also have maybe an incident with the same title that has multiple URLs, and maybe, it's just that domain was involved as well in the study. In that case, you wouldn't just want to automatically close it and forget about it. But yeah, this is my initial proof of concept to basically help reducing unnecessary informative alerts, because you can declare them as informative. In the very end, you still have to do something with them. And ideally, you can deal with them in an automated way and sleep well by knowing that you did not just close them and ignore them, but that you had, them analyzed through automation. So that's part of my little daily KQL. As you can see here, we're using KQL within a logic app, or as we call it in Microsoft Sentinel, in a playbook. Good. That was it from my part. Jenny, any spontaneous additions?
No, I think we're all set for today.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I totally forgot to announce the show yesterday, so I'm still happy. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people who just, had that in their agenda. 6 o'clock. Okay, cool. So yeah, we'll be back in a month. Let me quickly see who do we have next month.
I think it's next month is Ugur.
Oh yeah, Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if you want to pre-register, did I already do that? Log in. Let me see if that works. Because we had someone gave me feedback like, I always have to wait until the next meetup is there. So Jenny and we basically pre-registered all the meetups already, including with the speakers for those where we knew. So if you go to Meetup, you should find the following 4 or 5 shows already in Meetup. So if you're using Meetup for your agenda stuff, you can already, add that to your calendar. It's always on the last Tuesday of the month.
Unless there's something special. Although the next one, the March edition, we have Alexander Slautsky from the Custo team.
Yeah.
But then I'm also in Israel for the Blue Hat, together with Rogier and a couple of others.
So you're gonna stream live?
Let's see.
We have been
Okay.
discussing that, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. And otherwise, we might shift it a little bit later or day after. Yeah. There's a lot of conferences and events coming up next couple of months. So, let's see.
We do have a
how
meeting
that
with
goes.
Ofer, so maybe we can put him in as a special guest.
So for those who know them, we have Gijs Laconte as well coming up next month, Ur in June. Then, as you mentioned, from the Microsoft team, for those who did the detection agent detective. There, by the way, let me see. Yeah, that was something in my. Let me see if I find it. Detective. Yeah. Okay. This I found quite interesting, and I think it's okay to show now. Because the thing I believe it's over, right? The Custo detective.
This year it is.
Yeah. So here,
last year it was.
Yeah. Okay. So here I found something like hints made by this guy, and he doesn't tell the answer, but he gives some extra hints, and I found it quite interesting. I mean, there's always 1,000 ways to get to your result. But yeah, he really made a nice job of illustrating, some hints for the Custo detective. So I'll add that to the watch list, to the show notes. Yeah, you see how I get infected by Sentinel. I'm only talking about watch lists in my life. Good. Well, with that, Rogier, thank you very much for joining so spontaneously today and talk about your KQL coding standards. Johnny, as always, my friend, thanks for hanging out with me and with our guests. And with that, have a good time, have a good rest of the week, and at the latest, see you in February. Bye-bye.
See you next time. Bye-bye.